Hey everyone, it's Hannah. I wanted to make this video for you to talk about digital feedback and grading. If you were interested in attending the training session, but you didn't get a chance to make it, hopefully this video will show you a few tips and maybe give you a couple ideas to think about when you are thinking of trying how to manage the crazy animal that can be digital grading and assessing things online. It is definitely a lot more time consuming, depending on how you're doing your assessments online, especially when it comes to written work. So hopefully this, little presentation, this video will give you a few ideas for how you can manage that to make it less time consuming. So this is going to talk specifically about how you can use what's called flash feedback. It's a strategy, and how you can use screen recordings to save time grading online. So the obviously whenever we think of feedback characteristics, what we're trying to give to kids in terms of feedback, we want it to have four basic things, right? We want it to be meaningful so that it points out things that they can do better, points out things that they've done well, and kind of moves them in the right direction of where you want their work to eventually end up. It's going to be adapted for the student. So, what remarks you may say to one student to push them further along in their growth, you may say it or rephrase it a little differently for another student, that may be stronger or weaker in certain areas. So, it's going to always be personalized. That's the part that takes a lot of time. Another important characteristic of feedback is to have it be focused so that students can see very specific comments that are actionable, so they know exactly what concrete steps they need to take and what adjustments they need to make to their work to get it to that higher level that you're looking for. And then lastly, it needs to be timely. If we give feedback on an assignment that was due 3 weeks ago, often it's too late, and students have a hard time being able to recall or to think back to what it was that, what your expectations were. So, feedback, while it doesn't have to be instantaneous, does need to be given in a timely manner in order for it to be effective. And that's true regardless of what system you use to give feedback for your kids for assessments. So, to try to address all of those characteristics, there is a technique called flash feedback. And flash feedback is not really a new idea, but it's nice to think about and something to be reminded of when we're in this virtual environment. So there's four characteristics of it. So it kind of follows along the same, ideals of what we want to hit whenever we're talking about feedback for kids. But the four characteristics really put the onus of the feedback on the kids so that it does free up your time because you are not handling the front of the work. You're not doing, the nitty gritty, um, looking for commas, looking for vocab words, mistakes in mathematical problems. While you'll have to do some of that stuff, it puts really the brunt and the ownership of that learning and that work onto the students. So it becomes meaningful because the students are figuring out what it was that was wrong and what it is that they need to fix. And that helps them, really grow in their growth mindset and figuring out, in the metacognition, like what skills do I need to improve on. It helps them reflect on their work. And it's really a great way for them to be able to manage their own time and be able to manage their own thinking and their thought process and be able to revise a lot of their work. Another characteristic is that it is adaptable. You do need to plan when you do flash feedback for some students' work to take longer for you to grade and to give feedback on. And that's just natural. And usually you'll know which students those will be. You already have it in your mind, oh, this person, whenever their work comes up, probably I'm going to have to spend a little more time on it. And that's just the nature of giving feedback. It's going to be focused. So when you use flash feedback, this is really key. You're really only measuring one or two learning objectives at a time. So instead of grading a paragraph for sentence completion, for grammar usage, for vocabulary words, for a thesis statement or supporting details, instead of looking for 4 or 5 things in a piece of written work, you may only want to pick out a couple of those things. Like, I want you to have a great topic sentence and one detail that supports that topic sentence. And those are my 2 criteria. And that's all that I'm looking at. And so for you as a teacher, it helps you focus and that you don't need to spend time worrying about, does their entire paragraph have full sentences? Was it 3 to 5 sentences like I wanted them to be? Well, it doesn't matter because you're only grading that topic sentence and you're only grading for one piece of evidence if those are your 2 criteria. So by making this focused, it helps you as a teacher spend more times on the things, giving feedback to kids on the things that you think are crucial, important for that particular assignment. The other thing about flash feedback is it has to be timely, like I already mentioned. And this is where we can really use technology to our advantage. And so that's what I'm going to show you here on the next slide. So when you give flash feedback, and if you decide to follow some of those characteristics of keeping it very focused with only measuring 1 or 2, specific items whenever you're looking through written work, it's easy. I shouldn't say easy because it does take a little bit of time. It's not difficult to do. It does take a little bit of time, and it is less time consuming than if you were to open up a student's Google Doc and be able to, just insert comments. To me, that is a lot more time consuming than giving feedback via a screen recording. So this is where you are going to save some time. So if you assign a student, an assignment where they have to type a response, whether it's in a Google form, whether it's in a Google Doc, on a slide, maybe you're using Kami and you're having them edit and type a text block onto a PDF, or you're using TeacherMade, or whatever you may be using. If it's a written assessment where students are typing in at least a short answer, I personally believe it is going to save you time to use a screen recording to give feedback on those written responses, as opposed to using written comments or embedding comments into a Google Doc, or honestly, maybe even putting comments into Google Classroom. So here's how you can do it. You basically, what you'll do is go to Google Classroom, pull up the assignment in Google Classroom as though you're going to grade it like normal. And then once you have it pulled up on one student's work, begin recording your screen, whether you use Loom or Screencastify or Screencast-O-Matic or whatever screen recorder it is that you use or that you like to use. Just begin recording your screen right there. Go through the student's work, explain your feedback, talk about those 1 or 2 things that it is that they need to fix or what they did well on, what their next steps are. Try to keep this under 30 seconds. That way it's focused for the student. They know exactly what it is that they need to do, and you've not killed yourself because you will just have to multiply this time by however many students that you have. So try to keep it short. Save your recording. And then once you've saved your recording, get the link for your recording and paste that into the private comment section for the student so that they can see it in Google Classroom. But it's only for them to see. Don't put it in the class comments, because then everybody in the class will be able to see that. If they click on the link, they'll be able to see each student's review basically of what their feedback is. So make sure you put it in the private comments so it only goes to one student, the person that it is that you wanted to see. And that's how you can do your feedback. Now, if you have this whole process, will probably, I estimate, take about 2 minutes by the time you pull it up in Google Classroom, record your screen with the feedback it is that you want to give to the student, save it, get that link, paste it in. I estimate about 2 minutes if you keep to a 30-second feedback window. If you have 100 kids, that's going to take you approximately 3 hours to go through them all and to leave them each individualized, personalized feedback, even via a screen recording. So is it a huge time saver? I think it's a significant time saver because your alternative would be to pull up the student's work in a Google Doc or a form, however it is that you want to do it, and then type in written comments. And to me, that would take a lot longer to be able to say everything that I wanted to say to a student. So this will save you time doing it this method, but even though we call it flash feedback, anytime that you give personalized feedback to a student over written work, it is going to take some time. Unfortunately, there is no magic button that we can go ahead and press in order, to give kids the feedback in the terms that we want to say, without taking some time and spending some time to do it. So I would not use this method for everything. If you are an ELA teacher or an English or reading teacher, I would pick and choose which assignments you think are the most important and then give feedback, do a screen recording to give feedback on maybe major assignments or ones that are showing key, growth or writing skills it is that you're teaching. I would not use this just for your daily journal activities because that is not conducive for you or for the students, to be honest, because that's just a lot of videos for you to create. Not going to be in your best interest. Here are some other ways that you can use flash feedback. And I will also share these slides with you. There is a link in an earlier slide for a blog post and article about flash feedback that talks a little bit more about the technique and gives you some other ideas. Some of these are pulled from that article. So you can do what's called micro conferences. And I would probably suggest this and recommend this, especially if you do writing or written assignments on a regular basis. This is where you have students that submit, or before they submit a written assignment, they go ahead, they work on it, whether it's a paragraph, whether it's a one-page paper, a few sentences, whatever it may be. They finish their work, and then before they even turn it in, they look through their work, and then they kind of judge themselves, whether you already have a rubric that's assigned to it or whether you just say, these are the things that I'm looking for. They reflect and they rate themselves on their work before they even turn it into you. And then you may want to have them, whether it's on a separate, space on a Google Doc, or a separate section of your Google form, put in their rating and their reflection of themselves and what do they think they did well, what do they think they need to work on, what would they change if they had more time to work on the assignment, and then they submit that to you. So when you are doing your flash feedback and you create a screen recording, you can pull up that work and then you can skim their written work if there is something in particular that you want to check for accuracy to see if they've completed. But you can also just look at their self-reflection and you can say, oh, I agree with you. You did these two things well. And I think if you had more time, then yes, let's go ahead and let's work on, your topic sentence because it could use a little work. So you give feedback just on the self-reflection and the next steps that you want the students to do. You can also do this with Flipgrid. Flipgrid lends itself very well to this kind of back and forth conferencing idea because a student can create a video talking about their work, showing their work, and then you can leave them a video comment right back to them, in a platform that's very manageable for a student to access regardless of their age. So that's another idea if you do like that micro conferencing option. Another way you can do flash feedback is to do what's called a targeted response. And this is what I talked about earlier, where you only looked at one or two items in the assignment to actually assign points to. So you may want them to do a paragraph, but you're only actually awarding points if they have a great topic sentence and one supporting detail. That's what you're giving points for. That's what you're grading for accuracy. The rest you may honestly really ignore, or maybe you do give some points for completion for doing a full paragraph. If you're doing math, you could do order of operations, or maybe there's a portion of the equation that you want them to really be able to perform. And then the rest of it, going through the steps to finish solving the problem is maybe not so important to you. You just want to see that they can get it started. So you're only going to award points based on, them being able to write the equation, factor, whatever it may be. You will determine that. It's very similar to FCAs in Collins writing, where you're only looking at something very targeted to be able to give your feedback on. If you have students do a written response in Google Docs, for instance, or really on any web page, you can use the shortcut Control F. So if you have specific words or phrases that they should have in their response, if you hit Control F, it will bring up the find function, and you'll be able to have a search box that you can type in the word or the phrase that you're looking for, and it will search that document for you so that you don't have to spend time sifting through that document to find those words. Even if you told the students in your directions to highlight the words or the phrases that were key and they forgot to do it, you can hit Control F and it'll save you some time searching through those sentences. The last option is called Wise Interventions. And at the bottom of this slide here in the corner is a short video where it talks about how you can use comments, the Google Classroom comment bank, because Wise Intervention is all about using positive feedback comments to promote student growth and confidence. So rather than just listing a bunch of negatives or common errors that the kids will do in their written responses, it's better if you rephrase those into positive, empowering comments. So for instance, instead of saying, oh, you misspelled this word, check your spelling, say, please be careful with your spelling because I know you can do better. Having those types of comments where you are empowering the student because you know that they can hit those high standards tend to work better. And if you create a comment bank, if you do like using written comments, you can create a comment bank in Google Classroom so that you don't have to retype those frequently used comments over and over again. You'll just be able to type them in once, save them in the comment bank, and then you can click on those comments to be able to insert them into the student's document. That will save you some time. So there is a video there at the bottom of this slide that shows you how to use that comment bank if that's something that you are interested in. We're not going to watch it right now. So think about which lessons that you have coming up in the next 2 weeks. New strategies or different ways to, kind of include strategies in your teaching really should be implemented in the next, ideally a couple of days in order for them to really stick with you as a teacher. But if you have something coming up in the next 2 weeks, think about one activity or one lesson or assignment where you could implement flash feedback, just adjust your grading techniques and your grading criteria to align more with flash feedback. Is there one activity where you could do that? Think about what you could do. And if you're interested in using this technique and you would like to talk more about it, and if you'd be interested in co-planning with me, we can sit down together, look at your assignment or look at your activity or lesson, see how we can adjust it to make flash feedback work better for you and your students, and then what aspects of technology can we really leverage to use to our advantage to make this a manageable thing for you to do while we all try to figure out this digital remote virtual platform that we're in. So if you have any questions or need anything else or had any other ideas or thoughts, please definitely share them with me. I'm always glad to hear from you guys. Thanks for checking in. Have a great one.